Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I've got a great stream with a great guest that I think you're really going to enjoy. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that if you want to support the show, if you want to make sure that I can keep doing what I'm doing here, and you want to make sure you get all of the content, even things that are censored on YouTube, then you need to subscribe to blazetv.com. If you go to blazetv.com/Auron, you can get $20 off your subscription today. Of course, you won't just see me, you'll see all your favorite Blaze hosts. You'll get access to the behind the scenes stuff, asking questions, going on the streams, everything that is involved with Blaze TV. So again, go to blazetv.com/Auron to support my show and get all the great content today. All right, so the libs have lost their mind. Even a lot of Republican congressmen have lost their minds because Elon Musk is using his platform to kind of derail the pork process in Congress. The legislators had been getting ready to pass this massive continuing resolution, 1,500-page bill, did way more than just the continuing resolution, obviously, all kinds of funding, all kinds of pork. And Elon Musk, who has been promising, along with Vivek Ramaswamy, to use the Doge department to cut all of this waste, decided to take the hammer out early and used a social media campaign to bully these guys into changing what they were doing. And now we're hearing all this about billionaires. How can you believe billionaires impact Congress, impact legislation? Never heard of this kind of thing before. The wrong kind of billionaires, I guess, this time. So obviously the left is very angry at that. Also, satanic altars. We every year we have these stupid satanic altars built in these different state houses because they are trying to exploit freedom of religion and the understanding here. But they keep getting knocked down. They keep getting destroyed. We're going to talk about that as well. Joining me to discuss both of these issues is a podcaster and writer, Jay Burden. Thanks for coming back on, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, Auron. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
And of course, I appreciate you have the festive avatar here. You're appropriately hatted, so I always respect that.
I made about half a dozen of these in Photoshop 2 years ago for every holiday, including Kwanzaa, because we're very progressive here. And I've just been recycling them, right? It's like you have the same avatar, why should I find another PNG of a Santa hat? But I appreciate your compliment.
All right, well, we'll dive into everything here in a second. Before we do, guys, let's hear from today's sponsor. A nuclear blast devastates Los Angeles, throwing the nation into chaos in Angel Studios' upcoming film, Homestead, coming to theaters December 20th. Amid the chaos, an ex-Green Beret joins a prepper compound. Love grows, truth arises, and a community unites. Packed with heart-pounding tension, moral dilemmas, and a story that cuts to the core of what it means to survive, Homestead explores the humanity behind the apocalypse. Pre-order your tickets today for a chance to win a $300,000 giveaway, which includes a Bitcoin, a fully furnished tiny home from Box House, a custom Polaris OHV by Sparks Motors, and everything else you'd need to start your own homestead. Pre-order tickets for your chance to win at angel.com/Auron. That's angel.com/Auron. See you in theaters this Christmas season. So, like I said, we had this large continuing resolution. For people who don't know, we don't really do the budget process properly because nothing about our government actually works the way the Constitution intends. And so we end up with a lot of these continuing resolutions that just kind of move spending along for another 3 months or 6 months. And in theory, a continuing resolution is just supposed to keep spending where it is. It says, okay, we're going to do another year or another few months of this level of spending until we do the real budget, which we rarely, if ever, actually get around to doing. However, the way that this worked was that both Republicans and Democrats basically waited to the last possible minute when there was only like 2 days left to actually get this done. And then they decided to cram a massive amount of pork into this. Again, 15,000 pages. Way above all kinds of funding from, rebuilding bridges and school stadiums, things that might sound important like disaster relief to things that are absolutely absurd, like funding, college students in Egypt, more money for Ukraine, all of this stuff smashed in there. And we had Elon Musk recognized what was going on, said this is insane. He and Donald Trump both getting on, Elon on Twitter, Trump on Truth. Trump, just back to Twitter, man. Come on. Who are we kidding at this point? You're the president of the United States. We don't need to do this anymore. But anyway, they're both on there wielding the power of social media, and they start hitting this really hard. Elon gets to the point where he starts threatening to go after and primary any Republican who is supporting this kind of thing. And you see the panic in the eyes of the Republican caucus. They recognize that this is becoming very unpopular, and Mike Johnson kind of does a head fake, and we get a better bill. Still a lot of problems. We'll get into that in a second, but certainly better than the original. And we see the left just lose their mind, right? Like just absolutely move their line. Democrats are saying, oh, we had a deal, and then Elon Musk, this unelected billionaire, got in here and completely destroyed our plans, everything that we had agreed to. The media saying Elon is the virtual co-president. This is just an oligarchy where the rich are in charge. Jay Burton, is this the first time that rich people have affected policy in the United States of America?
Well, it's certainly not the first time. It's the first time in a long, long while that has made the liberal elite squeamish. And let's be honest, that's what really matters. What's interesting is this isn't just happening in the U.S. A similar fight has been brewing with Keir Starmer's UK government, right? Musk has, kind of sent invoice to the leader of the Reform Party, which is kind of like an alternative to the Conservatives, right, to their right, headed up by Nigel Farage. And almost immediately, you have the whole UK press, the whole UK government coming out and saying, foreign billionaires can't buy our elections. Now, obviously, those people didn't care when people like George Soros were doing the exact same thing. That's no problem. But when it's an enemy, it's a very real problem. Similarly, in the US, right, you have people like, Mike Bloomberg, right, who was not particularly successful, but he's been throwing a lot of money around. I mean, really, you could reach into a hat and pull out dozens of billionaires who have thrown their weight around in order to get democratic policy objectives, over the line.
Mark Zuckerberg famously buying large amounts of the electoral machinery and censoring his Facebook platform specifically to do these things.
Yeah, you may remember someone with a memory more than 2 or 3 years long, when Twitter itself, right, was weighing in very heavily on elections. And so to me, right, is this new? Yes and no. Right? Obviously, rich men have always had power in politics. But what is interesting is, for the first time really as long as I can think, someone who is, at least in some way, at odds with the deep state has an incredible amount of money and power behind him. And I think that's what makes, the Musk-Trump relationship so interesting.
Yeah, obviously, the initial point was a joke. It goes way back. We have getting into the Spanish-American War, right? Yellow journalism. You can just buy newspapers and use them to bully politicians through public opinion into action. The idea that this is some kind of unprecedented maneuver is just absolutely insane. Like, of course, you have these billionaires who have wildly altered American politics. Now, you can say that's a bad thing. You can say that's a good thing. You can say, well, it's neutral and both sides do it. But it's very obvious that this is not some unique situation, that Elon Musk has not somehow breached some norm that we've just never crossed before. And the fact that the media is reacting in this way, like you said, really points to that it's only about the target, right? They've been they've been very, very cozy with capital these last few years. The left, which has spent all of its time railing about the injustices of, and the need for redistribution and how can people make obscene profits and all these things. They didn't care for a very long time about that, because a lot of capital was going woke. A lot of billionaires were on their side. They had the Bezoses, they had the Zuckerbergs, they had the Soroses. And you're right that Elon Musk's influence is not just felt here in the United States. Like you said, we've got the UK, where that's a big deal. And then recently, Elon Musk just said that the AfD in Germany is the only party that can save Germany from what is happening there. there right now. Now, tragically, and we don't know too much right now, I'm going on kind of a 3-day rule on this before I kind of make any big announcements or do an episode on it or anything. But we just had a car drive into a crowd in a Christmas festival in Germany. This sounds very familiar because it happens far too often. It is a regular feature now of European life. And we don't know anything, but from previous attacks and from just the political realities in that area, it seems very likely that this was yet another attack specifically targeting Christians and Christian cultures. Often it has been done by Muslim extremists. This is a scenario where Elon Musk mentions that the AfD, the right, a lot of people call it the far right party, but it's just the only kind of right wing party in Germany, really, which has as the possible savior of that country. And now we see this terror attack right after. So this is a situation where Musk is obviously using a platform, not just his money, but more importantly, the ability that he has to kind of move the public opinion through Twitter and through his, at least in the United States, his ability to threaten to support, primary challenges in these different areas. Musk is very obviously pushing against a lot of these left-wing parties that were really looking for censorship, especially. This is very important to him. So he's doing this internationally. He has more power in the United States because he has a tighter relationship with Donald Trump and the actors there. And obviously he is a U.S. citizen. So much more power to wield in that area. But you're right to say that this is something that he's doing across multiple different countries and for pretty obvious reasons when you see the disaster happening in Germany right now.
Well, certainly, right? You and I have spoken multiple times about one of the classic mistakes conservatives make, right? And that is to find an inconsistency, right? Find something that isn't fair and point it out and say, haha, we win. Well, the problem is, right, the left doesn't care what you think about them, right? They care about winning. And so in a case like this, is it true by the kind of like most liberal interpretation that Elon Musk is turning his money into political power? Yes, 100%. That is completely true. But that's just simply how politics works, right? You're never going to get rid of that. Your only option is to throw away that mechanism and let your enemies use it, right? Which isn't particularly helpful at actually getting what you want done. I think your point about free speech is an apt one, right? Because we've seen this kind of like techno-globalist style elite really fall in love with censorship. When I was younger, I remember, the era when WikiLeaks was, the voice of the people, showing us the worst excesses of the George Bush regime. But a few years pass, all of a sudden Obama starts to get a little bit squirrely, starts, throwing some dissidents in jail. A few more years pass, and WikiLeaks isn't all of a sudden magically transformed into an agent of the evil empire of Russia, right? That free speech that they used, much like these billionaires, it was never a principle, right? It was simply a convenient tactic at the time. And so when I look at someone like Musk, he doesn't seem to me to be the world's most canny political actor, right? In some ways, he seems, quite ideologically attached to kind of certain liberal beliefs, one of which is, a belief in free speech. And obviously, that really helped Trump out in this election. The way that news was expressed was much, much more on X because it was a free platform. And certainly, right, like Trump was sort of buoyed into power by this like great mimetic energy. And yeah, sure, that was fun. And, maybe you lost a couple accounts, but all of a sudden, not only did Musk, keep people from getting banned, but he paid people, with the monetization features on X. And all of a sudden, right, when you have people with dissident opinions getting checks from Uncle Elon, even if they're small checks, well, that's a significant sea change. And so I think that really this is sort of it's a hopeful thing, right? I'm not saying Musk agrees entirely with me or with you or, any of our guys, so to speak, but it's a major sea change in politics. Now, one of the interesting things is, well, how does Trump react to this, right? Because it's at least sort of mathematically possible for Trump to say, well, Elon, thanks for getting me in office. I'm not running again. See you later, right? And just ignore everything he says, right? Elon wasted his money, Trump coasted into office. But I don't see that as being likely because, say what you will about the man, Trump has a very strong sense of both personal loyalty and personal betrayal. And he's obviously an intelligent guy. I think if we're recognizing that Elon Musk got him the election and by extension kept him out of jail, he's probably noticed that as well. So I think one of the other interesting dynamics into this is all of a sudden there is a new interest group in the Republican Party, Elon Musk and his friends. And that means that there's another group at the table for any sort of discussion. And when we compare that to, shall we say, legacy interests in American right-wing politics, right? There were sort of a very few number of interest groups. And people like you and I who have, shall we say, very conservative beliefs, we got left out in the cold. Well, all of a sudden there's one more person, right? There's one more person who is, again, not entirely our friend, but has been, making what I would consider positive statements about, the human birth rate. Musk recently came out and said, I don't believe in God, but I do think that Christianity is the right way to order a society. And again, it's not the ultimate win, but it's sure a step towards it.
It is very strange that a guy, again, both Trump and Elon are obviously not, the upstanding representation of kind of the Christian man, for sure. Maybe Trump believes in God. I believe he does. But neither of these guys are going to be, deacons at the local church. Let's put it that way, given kind of their track record. However, both of these guys are doing more for Christians and conservatives than any of the people who actually profess these beliefs, right? We've had like Mitt Romney's and we've had, Mike Pence's, guys who are supposed to have the personal lives, are supposed to have the values that Christian conservatives put forward, but they never did anything on them. They sold these people out over and over again. The support that was given to them because they profess these values and even live these lifestyles in both those cases, for the most part, didn't ever translate into any wins, any political reality for the right. And now you have two guys who are very far away from those lifestyles and the, kind of living through that belief set. But the simple fact that they acknowledge that these are the right ways to do things, this is the right way to live, this is the right way to order society, and they're actually willing to use some kind of power, they actually prioritize that over a war in Ukraine or something, means that they are securing more victories for the people who believe those things and want to live their lives that way than the people who necessarily were theoretically closer to that in their actual lived experience. And I think it's really important also that Elon is using a very particular dynamic, right? Oswald Spengler talks a lot about money power and how in a democracy, money power is really what's going to matter. In that kind of late civilization, it is culture and money power that actually drive these things. In the late civilizational phase. And we're seeing this in the kind of showdown of the billionaires, right? We have one billionaire, Trump, and we have a much larger billionaire, Elon, and the large network of people, the PayPal mafia, as King Pilled has described them when he came on the show, this kind of large group of Silicon Valley billionaires. And they are wielding large amounts of power, obviously, through that money. So the question is not, will we have billionaires in power, right? It's which billionaires will we have in power? And the way that Elon is wielding that power is particularly interesting because, again, nothing new about money in politics, especially democracy, late stage democracy. However, he is using his platform to get to the people. Well, many of his posts after this bill were defeated were about, your voice has been heard. Your voice is the voice of God. This is a victory for the people. He is in many ways presenting himself as a Caesar, right? A Caesar figure is one that calls on the power of the people to defeat the oligarchic class. So even though he himself would be labeled accurately, I believe, as an oligarch, he is using kind of the Caesarian tactics that are supposed to come at the late stage of this cycle of civilization, but he's using them with money instead of, he's not getting his own army, he's not leading a revolution against the moneyed elites in that sense, but he is using the tools of the new age, social media, these things in a very Caesar-like manner. I mean, he's kind of co-consul, right? That's kind of the question of the stream. Is he the co-president? In a way, it feels a little bit like he has this kind of co-consul status, but he's doing it at like outside and using this very Caesarian tactic to use the power of the people and the power of this technology. I mean, we wouldn't know what was in the bill if AI didn't exist, right? This was one of the huge problems with spending bills previous to this. You have these massive bills, no one could read them. Reporters don't do their job, obviously, and none of these watchdog organizations have enough staffers, to go through this kind of bill. I mean, the legislators don't know what's in the bill the vast majority of the time, but with AI, you can find out in a very short amount of time what's actually in there. And so he's using all these different tools and this leverage with the people to create a very different dynamic that existed before Trump was in office.
No, 100%. And I think your point about the different eras of civilization, the stages in its cycle is quite apt, right? Because people with a more reactionary bent have a longing for these kind of earlier, one might say, healthier stages of civilization. But the problem is, right, you are a product of your times. You can't really force yourself to think, like a medieval, right? You can try, you can certainly glean things from them, but fundamentally that is a different mental prism, different way to view the world. Similarly, right, there's a lot of talk about, Caesarism. And I understand the point, right? That this is the kind of civilizational, winter, right? Some might say. But also with comes that, right, we shouldn't necessarily assume that a Caesar will be like, the guy named Julius, right? We live in fundamentally a different time. And so, if you look at the original triumvirate, obviously all three men had different backgrounds, but fundamentally, what were they? They were generals, right? That was the way you accrued social standing in, the empire, right? I guess it wasn't the empire then, but you know what I mean, right? In Roman society. Whereas now, right, there's a lot less prestige attached to one, government at all, and two, the military. So if you're one of these truly exceptional individuals, right, if you're one of these, top 0.001% who are the kind of like ultra elite, where do you go? You don't go into the military. I'm sorry, obviously there are some who do, but if you do go into the military, you're probably not going to make it to a general for, any number of policy reasons. But you go to Silicon Valley, right? That is where our elite goes. Even before that, right? You have someone like Donald Trump, you become, a real estate billionaire. And so again, it's no shock that these sort of people are forming our sort of new triumvirate, if you will. I realize it's a triumvirate with only two people. I understand what that word means, but for the sake of discussion, right? If we're talking back to Caesar. Anyway, do you see what I'm getting at there, Auron?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It is the power of our time. If you were going to concentrate power, in what form would you concentrate it? In previous eras, it would have been in a military form. That's how you get the prestige. That's how you get the glory. Today, it really is fundamentally not just money, though money is obviously clearly important, but tech, right? The ability in the age of the mass man, the ability to activate the mass man is what matters. So propaganda, the fact that Trump is not just a billionaire, right? He's not just a real estate tycoon. He's a reality TV star. He knows how to brand. He knows how to talk to the masses. He knows how to change public opinion. And change perception of himself and others. His most powerful ability is his ability to steal a news cycle, right? That's what really disrupted the media, the establishment in his first presidency, was his ability to change a news cycle in the way that no Republican president previously had ever done. And so both of these men are not just wielding money, though they are absolutely wielding money, but they're wielding technology, they're wielding public opinion. They know how to manipulate it in a way that just did not exist previously. And these become the most important assets in a way that, military might and prowess would have been previously. It's great to have a legion, but in kind of the modern world, you can summon a legion when you have a social media platform or when you have a Q rating that's as high as Trump's. Like these are very different skill sets, but they still have the same political impact because they are the things that our society has organized itself around in prestige. You might say, well, that's not great. That's got its own problems. Well, that's fine. But like you point out, everyone is a product of their age. Children of late winter, as academic agent is fond of saying, cannot be the children of spring. And so in this moment, these are the skill sets that truly drive power in the United States. And it's no mistake that one man formally elected into the government, one man outside of it able to act with the power of somebody who has that kind of platform at his beck and call. These really create a team that allows you to, again, see instantly what's going on. Like I said, AI allowed them to go through this bill much faster than would have been previously. And of course, there's all kinds of payouts. There's all kinds of pork. The original bill was just filled with all kinds of ridiculous stuff. And importantly, the one that really got people, the thing that I've even seen a lot of leftists super angry about, is that it had a raise for Congress in it. It had representatives getting a raise in the bill. A lot of them, you saw guys like Dan Crenshaw saying, oh, well, we deserve it. Housing is expensive in Washington, D.C. The guy's a millionaire now because of his stock trading. But watching these rich, powerful people complain about housing prices and how much they need to get a raise inside of, sneak that into this continuing resolution while there's a housing crisis in the United States, while people cannot afford houses as it is right now, was just too rich for so many people. Watching these people who are doing nothing to help the average guy who cannot afford a home, people in their 20s, even their 30s, desperately trying to buy their first home, can't get it done. But oh, poor Congress, they can't afford their second house in Washington, D.C. because their pay is too low. This is just kind of the tone deaf. I mean, Dan Crenshaw completely went nuts. He went off the handle. He started screaming at the cat turd guy on Twitter. I mean, just lost his mind over this, really unmasking how deranged these people are and how little they care. And they're willing to tie all this stuff to funding for the military and cancer research and say, oh, you don't want to fund cancer research? You don't want to fund the troops? Well, no, you're obviously tying this together. You're holding this hostage so you can get a raise. It's insane.
Well, definitely. It is honestly amazing. Being a guy in the military for a number of years, you can just show up to Washington and become an incredibly gifted stock trader. I mean, who would have guessed, right? So I want to say
what a strange skill to acquire the minute you become elected.
It's amazing, right? You'd figure if that's all it took, more of these combat vets would be,
Well, that's they teach you that in SEAL training. You
go through
the
course,
right. You go through the Hell Week, and then at the end, they're like, by the way, this is how you manage a stock portfolio.
Yeah. Step 1 is how to clear a room. Step 2 is to how to massively outperform the S&P 500.
Right. How to pick the right defense contractors. Right?
Yeah. But in all seriousness, I want to go back just a step. To talk about what you said about the incredible technical skill of these men, right? I mentioned earlier that Caesar obviously, and then also the men around him were generals, and obviously that's a very kinetic form of warfare. But have you ever heard of fifth generation warfare, which is this idea of battles fought not physically but in the kind of mimetic sphere, right? This is where terms that you've probably heard from your lefty friends and family like disinformation and misinformation come from. And, while those terms are certainly abused, there is something to be said that, we live in a mimetic age. We live in an age of narratives and ideas. And so the people who are able to, command those are very close to, generals of, fifth generation warfare. It's an interesting idea.
No, it's a good way to put it. When the battlefield fundamentally changes, when something radically changes the way in which all kinds of combat are done, then you're going to see this kind of shift. Obviously, there are still real wars taking place, but even if you look at the Russian-Ukraine war happening, it's still to this day almost impossible to get like a straight answer of who's winning that war, what is happening. Obviously, at this point, it's Russia, but for a very long time, it was almost impossible to get kind of any real grasp of the conditions on the ground because the propaganda coming out of both sides was just insane, right? There was no way to really gather what was happening. And, you take that principle and you bring it into kind of the non-active combat situation where we are constantly in this disintermediated space because the media stranglehold has been broken and you're not sure who to believe and what to do. Well, then you've got a guy like Musk. He gets the platform, he opens it up, and he has a clear voice. He's able to cut through much of this, cut through the media. Obviously, Donald Trump and his ability to make an in run around the media. These are generals with very different tactics, and they are able to make a very substantive change in the way that politics operates. Now, interestingly, I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of the bills. Obviously, there are people who are much better at that. But an interesting thing that has changed in this new bill, the new bill is much shorter. It's 115 pages instead of 1,500 pages. It keeps some of the biggest spending, but those were the things that people were most worried about. Again, the disaster relief and the farm bill, these kind of things. But the thing that they've added is the debt ceiling. This is the big controversial change. They want to increase the debt ceiling or waive it off for 2 years. And I think Trump's even talking about longer, but at least 2 years. Now, on one hand, this basically takes it off the table for Trump. He doesn't have to worry about it. It doesn't become a constant hindrance to him, especially because Trump has never been a deficit hawk. That's never been his main focus. And so that's kind of, maybe he wants to build walls. Maybe he wants to invest in infrastructure. He's not a guy who's necessarily adverse to spending in principle. The fiscal conservative mainly comes in, not starting a new war, those kind of things, but he doesn't have a principal problem in spending money on the country itself. On the other hand, these are people who have been complaining about inflation, right? The inflation is out of control. Part of the housing problem is the inflationary bubble that is occurring. And so if you're going to take the debt ceiling off the table for a few years, you're pretty much going to guarantee an increase in inflation. That's going to be good for the paper economy. That's going to be good for the mystical GDP Wall Street economy. But it's not going to help the average American. And so there's an interesting scenario there where it does give Trump a kind of breathing room to do certain things, but realistically, it's not exactly the fiscal scenario that he promised.
That's 100% true. I mean, obviously, there are a certain number of things that I quite agree with Trump on. I think he's definitely better than any reasonable alternative we could be expected. But let's be honest, right? Trump is not a conservative in any meaningful way, right? You mentioned the fact that he's unlikely to be particularly religious. Interesting detail. It turns out Trump is actually the only the second president ever in history to change his religious denomination. He kicked himself out of the Presbyterian Church USA, which I think both of them were probably happy about.
There's a mutual divorce there.
Yeah.
One of many Trump has had. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Not Trump's first divorce, but right. We have to accept that, fundamentally we were not given, a perfect option, right? You and I can hypothesize about the very real damage that Trump's spending policy will have. That's likely to be true. Although I'll be perfectly honest, I know next to nothing about the economy, so who knows? But at the same time, right, we've got to grade it on the scale of what else could have happened. And I cannot imagine a world in which, President Kamala Harris, heaven forbid it, where she would have been more fiscally responsible. And that doesn't mean that you let him off the hook. It doesn't mean that you get the Republicans everything. But again, right, we were presented a binary, right? We had two choices. And given that choice, it was better.
Yeah, I saw I saw Steve Deace make the point on Twitter that, the debt ceiling is very much a mirage. This is something that gets raised all the time. Republicans vote for it all the time. That doesn't make it a good thing, but that is a momentum, that there's a gradient to American politics that, for better or worse, this is an inevitability to some degree. There are things that I want to fix. The economy is absolutely one of them, but it is not my first priority. My first priority is the border. My second priority is ending foreign wars, right? These are the things I want to see done. I know that Trump is much better on these issues, right? He's not going to be perfect, but he's going to be vastly better. If there's one thing we've seen consistently promised, even up into this point from Trump, and he's not really known for his consistency, the one thing he has promised is mass deportations. Now, again, Trump has failed before. I'm not saying that, this is going to be 100% happening, but it is far more likely under him than it would have been under Kamala Harris, or let's be honest, pretty much any Republican either, any other Republican. And so this is a scenario where, would I like to see spending curtailed? Would I like to see a better fiscal policy? Would I like to see inflation brought under control? Absolutely. But is it my top priority? If he's making room space to maneuver on those other issues by putting that one on the burner, then I'm willing to give him some space. This doesn't mean I don't say criticize him. This doesn't mean I don't say call out when something's wrong. I'm not saying you can't disagree with Donald Trump or point out when he fails or any of these things. I'm not the guy who says you got to just, put your blinders on and, cheer for Trump and every single maneuver. But I am saying I'm not going to stand here and pretend like he's going to be worse than the other options. And I'm also not going to assume that every time he doesn't do exactly what some portion of the conservative movement wants him to do, that means that he's just betrayed us and it's all over and we should have gone, somewhere else. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. So I would have preferred to see an actual clean continuing resolution brought about. The real true clean CR seems like it's going to be a myth. We're not going to see that. But the way legislation is supposed to get done in the United States is you pass a bill and then you pass the next bill. You don't make the omnibus and hold everybody's spending hostage and say either you fund my DEI zoo or my education for 7-year-olds in all the possible gender options, or you're stopping the troops like that. You're starving the troops and denying disaster relief and cancer research. Like these things should not be bundled together. But obviously, that's probably not going to change overnight. Should it be a goal? Yes. Would that be great? Yes. But this is not the show in which I'm going to sell you the political illusion that like we're suddenly going to make the Constitution work exactly the way it was intended. Like that's just probably not going to happen in one fell swoop here.
Well, exactly. Right. And you and I are completely aligned, right? I'm not a hardcore MAGA guy. I'm not anticipating Trump fixes everything. And a big part of the reason for that is, look, like everything else, politics is a game of limited resources. You can't do everything. There is scarcity, at least in the case of the US government. There seems to be no scarcity for just inventing money out of nowhere. But there is another currency that's limited, and that's political capital, right? You can't make everyone do everything all the time, right? Even dictators like Stalin weren't able to do this. You have to pick your battles. And so if you look at, well, okay, what was Trump's mandate? Why did people put him in office? Well, I mean, certainly there was a part of it that people were really, really sick of living under Joe Biden. Fair enough. But if you look at his top line issues, right, it was the border, as you mentioned. It was getting out of foreign conflicts like Ukraine. And then also safety and security, right? Crime is, despite what you may read in certain sources, way, way up, right? Some of this has to do with the open border. Some of it doesn't. And so when you look at like, okay, what are your priorities, right? If you have a limited supply of political capital, where do you use it on? Well, those are much higher up the list than fiscal conservatism. Not only for, any Republican in the same situation, one would hope, but also Trump in particular, right? This has never been an issue he's particularly cared about. He's really not, like I said, much of a conservative at all. But what he does have that's different from other Republicans is, like I said earlier, he has a strong sense of, personal loyalty and betrayal. And obviously he's had his failings, right? He, left the Jan 6 guys out to dry, although who knows, he may make that right. But, the reason people like him is because they see him as representing them, right? Like he said multiple times, the reason they're coming after me is because I represent you. And I think that, if you look at his base, certainly there will be people who are fired up about this, but I'd imagine not as much as they're fired up about, the border or the kind of very real security threats Americans are facing.
Yeah, and it's not like these things aren't related, right? If you close the border, then you can actually get your fiscal house in order because you don't have tens of millions of people who aren't supposed to be here, who are on all kinds of programs, who are messing with your healthcare system, your education system, stressing your infrastructure. There's a large amount of savings to be had there. The same is true when it comes to foreign policy, right? If you're not constantly involving yourself in foreign conflicts, the amount of money that you can save there is astronomical. So it's not like these things are untied. I mean, how many hundreds of billions of dollars have we sent to Ukraine at this point, right? Just ending that is a fiscal conservative issue. It's tied to it as well. So it's not like you can't have both of these things to some degree, but you might not be putting the debt ceiling as your highest priority. There might be other issues. Again, that doesn't mean that ultimately the goal shouldn't be to fix these things, but working your way down the order of operations, like you said, safety, border, foreign conflict. These are the things that matter much more to the people of the United States. Fixing those to the degree that you can also has a high impact on the economy and on the debt, and that's great. But people want to see that stuff fixed first, and so that it makes more sense to save your political capital and focus it there. Also, the amount of influence that is tied up in those things is so high. Being able to cut those gives you more power to then wield in other areas, right? Once you win victories in those areas, the momentum that you have, the amount of power that you wrangle back makes a significant difference. The other thing that we wanted to talk about today was the instance of satanic altars in these different state houses. Obviously, I believe it was last year. It's already been a year. We had the one in Iowa, and the great heroic Michael Cassidy, who may or may not deserve a statue, was able to physically remove that blasphemy from his state capital. And this year we had one in New Hampshire, which was erected and then mysteriously knocked down. I can speak to the whereabouts of Michael Cassidy if necessary. And then it was put back up by these LARPing atheist Satan worshiping whatever guys. And then it was taken back. It was knocked back down again, right? So it got physically removed twice. In Minnesota, it didn't need to be demolished. One was erected, but then was eventually removed. The government said it had to be taken down. So it's interesting. Last year, this was a big talking point, especially among American conservatives. The fact that someone had knocked down this satanic display in the house in the state house. What a lot of conservative commentators are like, oh, this is a disruption of law and order. This is reckless. This is vigilante justice. These kind of things. It was a huge blow up and debate across the thing. This time, this altar gets taken out twice in New Hampshire, and basically we've heard nothing. Right? It hasn't been a big news item. Conservative commentary hasn't been railing against it. What's your take on this?
So yeah, I want to dispute what you said. This is not vigilante action. It's community policing.
Oh no, I'm with you. I was saying this is what other commentators 100%. I'm with you.
And I've been reliably informed. If you call it community policing, it's completely okay, right? But in all seriousness, right, this is actually an interesting front in the culture war, because this hasn't been getting a lot of play, but there's been a tit for tat going on, right? You had a small town in Texas where a group of Satanists got together and lobbied the government to get rid of a nativity scene set out in front of the courthouse. Now, they were shot down, right? But there seems to be a sort of a concerted push by Satanists, and I don't mean this in an Alex Jones way. I mean very, very cringe Redditors who have started the Temple of Satan, not the Church of Satan. I assume there's a difference. But they seem to be basically making a push to make life difficult for Christians, right? You may have read about this so-called HAIL program, right? Which is a program launched in Ohio schools to basically say, well, if Christians can offer sort of Sunday school programs or after-school church programs, then so can we, right? And that really kind of shows an interesting part, both about the psychology of the Satanists, but also the left writ large. Because these groups of Satanists don't tend to be what they call religious Satanists. Now, admittedly, even an ironic Satanist is ultimately serving his ends. I understand.
Absolutely. There is no ironic Satanism. Yeah.
Exactly. But they view themselves as basically turbo atheists, right? Their whole existence is centered around making their parents mad, right? My dad made me wake up and go to church every Sunday morning, so I'm going to be everything he hates. But there's this desire to take anything that is kind of good and wholesome and connected with either conservative America or the church and to denigrate it in any way possible. And this is something we've seen the left do over and over and over again, right? It's not enough for them to win. They have to ruin what you have, ruin what you like. You may remember, right, when the statue of Robert E. Lee from Richmond was melted down, or Charlottesville, right? They cut off its face, they ritually scarred it, they made a big photo, they made a press release out of it. And that's because, which interestingly enough is a very satanic way to view the world, right? That in order for them to win, you have to lose. And it really is just kind of a whole worldview centered on negation and destruction. Even look at these satanic displays, right? Did they invent their own holiday for Satan? Of course not, right? They want Christians to be upset on Christmas. That's what makes them win, right? To take what is, by all accounts, right, the second holiest day of the year and put a symbol of everything that is antithetical to Christ and to Christians on it. And I think that attitude of, just kind of like wanton destruction is one you can see in many places as well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. This is obviously something that is, there's no sincere religious belief here. This is just a hack in, in kind of the current interpretation of the legal code to kind of spit in the eye of Christians. They want to insult them, this kind of thing. And I think it's really important for Christians to recognize, and for the larger populace to recognize, that of course this is never what the founders meant by freedom of religion. The idea of, if you had told anyone who was framing the Constitution that ultimately the First Amendment would be interpreted for the satanic altars to be built on Christmas inside the houses of the state, they would have probably physically removed you from the situation. And this is not something that was ever intended. And we need to recognize, and I think more and more people are waking up to this, that there has to be the understanding that America is a Christian nation and that Christianity needs to be granted preference. That doesn't mean that you can't have alternate religions, practiced in their private places of worship. But in the public square, America is a Christian nation. And we should not be allowing interpretations of our protections that disabuse us of that notion, that allow for some kind of legal exploit to insult the vast majority of the country. While, Christian observance has gone down, religious observance in general has gone down, and specifically Christian observance in the United States, the United States is still a much more Christian country than pretty much all other advanced first world countries are. The overwhelming majority of Americans identify as Christian in some capacity, even if they aren't regularly attending church. And so there's really no reason not to acknowledge that in our culture and in the way that we conduct ourselves. Again, that doesn't mean you have to, force down onto everyone public affirmations of Christ as king, though he absolutely is. But it does mean that you should be recognizing that there's absolutely nothing incompatible with the values of the United States, with the founders and the Constitution and everything else that conservatives love, that in any way prohibits you from preferring, religious displays in the United States that are Christian. And the fact that, the attempt to erect these altars, these displays in that are satanic in nature, the fact that they are regularly getting knocked down and that this seems to be not a huge issue for people, I think that's ultimately a positive development. As you said, there's a certain level of justice that should be, recognized in that, whether or not it's done completely through the legal system or not. And it's a good thing ultimately that this is something that is not being allowed in many of these houses anymore. This is not continuing. This insult is not being allowed to stand.
Well, and I think there's a through line between both of these stories, right? Both the shall we say public consensus to smash balls, if you will, and then also a great number of conservatives who have made peace with the idea that their interests are perhaps better represented by people who aren't exactly like them, right? By people who don't present as particularly conservative in their personal lives. And that's basically the realization that this is not a fair game, right? The Robert's rules of order that our enemies impose on us are not mutually respected. And so, the idea that you can simply, exist, exclusively by the written rules, do exactly what you are quote unquote supposed to do, what you're taught in civics class, that's coming apart. And is that ultimately a bad thing? Yes, I would much rather live in a society where everyone lived by the same shared code of conduct, right? Where there was a moral unity among the population. But the problem is that's been dead for a long time. That's been dead for my entire life, for your entire life. Let's be honest, probably at least my grandparents' entire life, right? And so pretending as if that's still the case is ultimately foolish. Effectively, right? These are short-term gains, right? If you have the opportunity to do something, you should. Now, is that damaging to the social fabric? Yeah, probably. But to be honest, there's not much of it left.
Absolutely. All right, guys, we're going to head over to the questions of the people. But before we do, Mr. Burden, is there anywhere where you want people to go? Where can they find your great work?
Yeah, sure. So my primary output is the Jay Burden Show, which is available on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, now Rumble, anywhere you want to listen to podcasts. What I do there is I host an interview show twice a week. I've had Auron on a number of times, as well as some great guests he regularly features. If you check me out there, I appreciate it. And again, Auron, thanks for having me on.
Of course, always great to have you. Make sure that if you are not watching the Jay Burden Show, you are fixing that right now. Let's see here. General Grievance says the Jay Burden, the Jay Auron Burden Tire Show is my favorite crossover. Sorry, Prudentialist, you've been bumped to number 2. Oh, we love all of our excellent recurring guests here, but yes, always great to see Mr. Burden and his Beaver Gang show up. Let's see here. FM9K says, say what you will about the first American triumvirate, but everyone in it is Crassus. Yes, I meant to make that joke. Thank you for making it. I was going to get to the Crassus joke when you were saying everyone's a general. It's like, yeah, but man, Crassus is like general plus, plus Elon Musk. So here we've got Plum Logan saying, noticing an ironic cross-section among those just learning about billionaires and politics and those afraid of losing the Department of Education. Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
As a wise man once said, many such cases.
Many such cases. King Pilt says, started listening just in time to hear my name. Appreciate the shout out. All hail Mrs. MacIntyre and Bird. Well, thank you very much, Ian. Yeah, your PayPal Mafia theory has obviously borne itself out very well, and you deserve all credit for developing it. And we are seeing it play out in real time here. So the very helpful insights. King Pilt also has his own show, so you can check out his insights there. And then we have Charlemagne, who says, there's an easy solution to this co-president situation. Trump and Musk can just get gay married, and then Musk can legally be co-president. Yeah, well, I mean, given that Jill Biden has, theoretically been, kind of the acting president in many ways during the Biden administration, and we just have the Wall Street Journal just finally did the piece where like all of the Biden staffers were admitting like, yeah, Joe's been checked out for years. We've been running the whole thing the whole time. Like, yeah, you might as well, get that marriage going, and then he too can wield all the power inside the White House when, Trump's an old guy, he maybe he'll start, forgetting everything in a year or two, and then Elon can pick up the slack. So
that's a wild concept for sort of like a madcap comedy.
Right.
Two college roommates, 50 years later, one of them becomes president, so they get like a fake marriage certificate so they can rule the country.
Yeah, it's like the
writer listening. Hit me up.
There was like the Adam Sandler movie. It's him and Kevin James, and they like get fake gay married for the tax benefits or whatever. Like basically the same premise, but for the president of the United States.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. If any of the any of the conservative movie studios or outlets are interested, you can contact us. We'll get you. Charlemagne will get a script going. We can get all that set up. We'll make that happen. All right, guys. Well, we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up. This is the last scheduled production of the year. I'll probably have the cozy kind of Christmas spectacular that we tend to do after Christmas, but just want to say to everybody, a very Merry Christmas. Appreciate all of you guys for watching. Everything has just grown. It's been an amazing year. The podcast is well over 1 million downloads just on itself, not even counting YouTube and Rumble and Twitter and everybody watching over there. The book came out. The audiobook should be coming out this week as well. Like, it's just been an absolute amazing year. Made a lot of great friends. So many of you have been around since the beginning of the channel. It's just an honor to still be doing this and to have you guys around. So just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, happy other holidays, New Year and all those things. And ultimately just really blessed by all of you sticking around and continuing to watch and making this a reality. And it's just been fantastic. Of course, if it's your first time on the channel, you just happen to stumble around on the last show of the year, then you can go ahead and subscribe. Make sure you turn on the notifications, the bell, all that stuff, so you see these streams when they go live. If you want to get the broadcast as podcasts, you need to subscribe to the Auron MacIntyre Show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you want to pick up some merch, last minute for that holiday shopping, then you can go to shopblazemedia.com, and there's the Auron MacIntyre collection there. You can pick up some stuff from the show. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Merry Christmas. And as always, I will talk to you next time.